Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Popcorn Square. I am here, Buttons, with my co-host,
Neff.
Kage.
All right, so we're going to launch right into this. Nobody mourns the wicked, everybody. So one of the biggest, box office smashes that we've seen in a while, we've got Gladiator II and Wicked. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about these two movies because they've been compared to this, they've got a lot of attention for being compared to being, this whole Barbenheimer phenomenon.
Yep.
And of course, with these movies, I really don't like the name, guys, but they're calling it Glicked. So, Gladiator and Wicked. So we're going to talk about the comparison between Glicked and Barbenheimer and see if it's trending to kind of have that same effect that those two movies did last year. And we're going to go into some reviews for that, as well as we're going to talk a little bit about the Netflix show Arcane. Mm-hmm. So we're going to launch right into this. Guys, I saw Wicked and I loved it. I am a theater nerd, so, this movie for me, I talked about it in previous episodes of the Popcorn Square that, I really wanted to like this movie. I was like, I'm jazzed. I loved Wicked. I've seen it performed live. When I was in school, this musical was one of the top tier musicals that all of the people who love theater and love musicals, this, you're going to enjoy the songs in this. They're catchy. They're of course a little campy, because what musical isn't a little campy, but they're fun. And, even though they do address some serious themes throughout this musical, they do it in such a way that it never feels like you're going into it and the whole movie is just dark and depressing. Like, no, they keep it lighthearted throughout the movie. Even when you have some serious moments, they turn it around real quick so that you're never like wallowing in like the darkness for a long period of time. They're going to throw some humor in there and some lighthearted, dialogue or songs to kind of pick you back up so that you're just having a good time. And this movie, that's what it was for me. It was a good time. I was got a 2 hour, 40-minute runtime on this, and it did not feel like I was sitting in the theater squirming and like waiting for it to be over. I'm not going to lie and say there weren't a couple of parts that, I felt like they could have picked up the pace or even cut completely from the movie. But, for me, having the experience of having seen it performed and then seeing this version of it, it was a good time for me. Wow. And, out of the respect of the other people in the theaters, I did not bust out and sing along with these songs. But, every time one came on and I was like, oh man, this is that song. I'm so excited and I want to see what they do with it. Visuals were great. Mm-hmm. I definitely, they put a good chunk of change. We've talked about this before. I believe the budget was over
150.
Yeah, I think it was like about 140, 150. So I mean, they put a lot of money, and it shows like in the visuals, not just the CGI, which they had to do for like the animals, and some of the more technical scenes that they had with flying and things like that, and the magic that's involved. I mean, this is a fantasy world. They create a whole Wizard of Oz environment, not just the Emerald City, but even, I will tell you guys, it was a fun little Easter egg in there at the beginning where you see Dorothy mm-hmm. and the Tin Man and the girl, they're all walking on the yellow brick road. So, I mean, it's a fun little, little bits of extra that they throw into the movie. And there's even, I don't think it's really much of a spoiler anymore, because most people who wanted to see this movie, they already know the original Broadway cast, who they are, and they do make an appearance. I won't say what it is that they do, but they do make an appearance, and it was so great to see them, because those two characters, or those two actresses, I guess you could say, they've always had such a great chemistry. So to get to see them kind of being honored by having a small little part in this movie was great to me. And I will go ahead and say I giving it an 8 out of 10 for me. I think I think if you like musicals, you're going to love this. If you don't like musicals, don't go see this, guys. You're going to be bored out of your mind. You're going to feel like the 2 hours and 40 minutes is killing you slowly. So you got to like musicals to see this. And that's not me saying anything against this movie, because I love this movie. I just like musicals. So I'm going to have a different perspective of somebody who doesn't care for musicals. But for everybody who was disappointed in Cats and was like, oh my gosh, this was horrible, this is not that. This is so great. This is wonderful. You know, the last couple of movies that we've had over the years, you know, not all of them have been ones that I would even see a second time. Like, I watched them the first time and I was like, oh, okay, it's a musical, it's all right, you know, I enjoyed it, but not to the extent where I would want to watch it again. This one I can definitely say I would watch again. So definitely high praise for that. Like I said, an 8 out of 10 for me. I think we're going to talk a little bit about Gladiator II now, just to kind of give a different perspective on the other movie that came out this weekend. Neff, do you have any thoughts? I know you saw Gladiator II.
Yep, saw Gladiator last night. I gave my review to you guys, a quick review on it. Didn't really try to give you guys any spoilers there. But like I said, guys, I give it an 8.1 out of 10. Pretty solid film all the way around. I'd be hard-pressed to find someone that just said the film is not a good film. It's a pretty good film, and it's a sequel. It makes sense. It connects with the first film. Obviously, the first film came out in the year 2000, starring Russell Crowe. Obviously, Ridley Scott was the director there. We had some different writers at that time, but I believe David Scarpa did the writing for this film. I think he had someone else helping him as well, but he definitely did the screenplay primarily. Ridley Scott is back directing at 87 years old. Ridley Scott has not missed a step. Visually, the film is on point aesthetically as well. The writing is pretty solid and compact. Very linear story. While there are twists, there are not twists that take you out of the film itself. It makes sense within the context of the film. Denzel Washington, I don't even need to say anything about this guy, A+. I do think he's probably going to be nominated for Best Supporting Actor in this film. I've seen reviews that say he steals the film away from Paul Mescal. Now, I don't think he steals the film. Like I said last night, guys, in my review, everybody did a good job all the way around. Like I said, if anybody is going to be almost forgotten and should not be forgotten in their performance, it's Connie Nielsen. She played a great Lucia Aurelius. I thought she was very good in this role. Like I said, everybody was top-notch. Pedro Pascal. Every movie I'm seeing this guy in, not that I watch every movie that Pedro's in, I'm starting to like him a lot more. The guy can just act. Yes, he's in a lot of movies, but if he's performing well, you can't be mad at that. Pedro was great in this film. He wasn't in the film a bunch, but I'd say he's in the film probably, I want to say 45 to 50% of the film. But it's not that he was in every single scene. But I would say the scenes that he was in were extremely impactful. Paul Mescal did a great job as the lead. It's kind of hard to step into Russell Crowe's shoes there, and I think he did a decent job at that. Like I said, guys and gals, people will say, oh, you know, we didn't need another Gladiator film. But this is the difference. It's a sequel, not a remake. So you got a sequel. The sequel is a good film. I've talked about this, like I said in my review last night. You know, if anybody didn't like the film or they had any thoughts, positive or negative, let's have dialogue about that, of why you didn't like the film or why you did like the film, and let's see if people can articulate why they liked it either or way. But from my perspective, I thought the film was a decent film. I just talked to Kage off mic, and I think I might have brought it up in a review last night, the Easter egg of the Romulus and Remus. If guys watched Alien Romulus, guys and gals, if you guys did watch Alien Romulus, which came out in August, that was another Scott-free production, Ridley Scott's production team. He was also, I believe, executive producing with Fade Alvarez on there. Fade was the director, obviously. You know that the Renaissance stations are called Romulus and Remus. So when they were entering the gateway of Rome, they had a little anecdote there that was an Easter egg towards that. So I thought that was really cool, just something that people didn't really catch there. But overall, solid film. Like I said, Denzel Washington's great as Macronus, a great villain, and has a great character arc as well. Everybody had a character arc, even though they do bring in Connie Nielsen, and she's one of the legacy characters within this storyline in this film. She even has a different arc of her own that continues from Gladiator 1. So overall, everybody, I thought, did a good job. Ridley Scott has done it once again. I'm giving it an 81 out of 100. Currently, Rotten Tomatoes has the audience score is at an 84%. It wasn't at 85%, so I'm right in the same ballpark there. I think The critics are giving it a 71, but overall, I would say it's favorable. I'd say it's favorable. I'd say it's worth the watch. The film does run 2 hours and 28 minutes. Not too many things that I would change. Would have definitely liked to see that naval battle scene last a little longer. I know Buttons was saying she was excited for that scene in particular. And that was a good scene as well. But like I said, I feel like my favorite scene was the battle between Pedro Pascal's character, General Acacius, and Paul Mescal's character, Lucius. So I think that was the most intense scene, and I think that scene really carried out the movie. It kind of carried from that moment on. That scene really impacted everything afterwards, and I think with that scene being as powerful as it was for the film, it made the conclusion even better. So, like I said, overall, Gladiator II was a good film. Everybody did a good job on it. I think they can get some Oscars off this thing, and I think it's definitely worth the watch. Will I buy it? I don't know if I'm going to buy it. I think it's one of those films where if you watch it once, you're content. It's not a film that you have to watch 3 or 4 times. Doesn't mean the film's bad, but there's some films you can watch and say, you know what, I experienced that. I really did like it. Don't know if I'll watch it again because it was a one-time thing for me. But I think Gladiator does well with everything that it tried to do, and I think it's a fitting sequel. Kage, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Neff. I also saw Gladiator 2 yesterday, and I gotta say, a solid 8 out of 10. I was pleasantly surprised by this film. Normally when you make a sequel 10, 20 years later, they tend not to be that good because they're trying to capture lightning in a bottle from the 90s or 2000s. And I'm proud to say that this did not follow this trend. It was very much its own thing with a whole new cast of characters, with Connie Nielsen, I think, probably being the only character to come back. But like regardless, everyone brought their A game, just like Neff said. Denzel Washington, I've never seen him in a movie that I didn't like. He's just a damn good actor, to simply put. Pedro Pascal, I've seen him in a lot of things lately. He's my first time seeing him was in Mandalorian. Then I saw him in The Last of Us, which is a pretty solid series. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. And now we're seeing him in this, and he did not disappoint.
Hansel. He's so hot right now.
Well, it's like fame is like that. I didn't mean it like that, then of course you have Joseph Quinn, who I've never heard of before until he had long hair and shredded on a guitar in Stranger Things. I feel like one episode of that put him on the map. And now I'm seeing him in little things. I saw him in Quiet Place. He was great in that movie.
Yeah, I think he's slated to be in an A24 film. I saw a preview for.
It's pretty busy.
Yeah,
so
so
he's picking up a lot of roles.
He's picking up a lot of roles, so he will be an actor to be watching in the future to see what other projects him and Pedro Pascal. Let's see what they come up in. But of course, yeah, overall the story of Gladiator 2, the action, everything was on point. The pacing was on point. There was never a moment where I felt like this scene is running too long or I didn't need to see that. I think every scene was the appropriate length. There was no filler in this film.
What was the runtime for this movie?
2 hours and 28.
So that is on a little bit on the longer side, but I feel like
I feel like they definitely packed in what they could.
Right.
Yeah.
For the amount of time that they had, I could see this film running a lot longer. I believe they said there is no director's cut, which is interesting. But I think if there were a director's cut, I could see it at least being 3.5 hours easily.
Right.
Yeah, it was like I said, it didn't overstay its welcome with me.
That's good.
I
And
thought
it didn't feel that it was cut short either. So
Yeah, the movie, if anything, it felt like there's some movies.
it was complete. Like
Yeah.
it felt like
it was
had a
complete.
solid.
Yeah, there's been movies that we've seen where I'm just like looking at my watch. I'm like, okay, it's running a little long. Smile was a good movie, but they could have definitely shaved some time off of
Yeah.
that. But like the action, the scenes, the story that they were telling was so compelling that I was like, you had my attention. I was hooked. You got me. You know what I mean? So nothing felt like filler. The ending was great. There were some twists, some revelations and stuff. Everything was perfect. No, I don't really have any complaints. Really, I don't know. Like, I guess the only reason I don't give it, this is my personal opinion, the only reason I don't give it anything higher than an 8 out of 10 is when I watch movies in terms of like Greek mythology, movies like Troy, Immortals, anyone remember that one? Wrath of the Titans.
So this
You-
one being Roman mythology.
Roman mythology, you kind of know what you're getting, and it didn't really bring anything new to the table. And,
So it
you
wasn't
know,
like a
agree.
groundbreaking.
it wasn't groundbreaking
agree.
at all. That doesn't make it a bad movie. Doesn't make it not entertaining. It was, what is that famous quote from the first one? Are you not entertained, ladies and gentlemen? I was thoroughly entertained, and that theater that I was in was packed.
Yep.
And talking to Neff, he confirmed it. He said the same thing.
Yep.
His theater
It was
was
packed.
packed. You know what I mean? And that says something, especially in 2024 when we're just not really having great movies. There's some gems hidden there, but
And, I think that leads into a good next part of our conversation, which is Glicked compared to Barbenheimer. So, we all know about the success, and it became a very surprising combination of movies, which of course was the Barbie movie and
Oppenheimer.
And of course, there was some running jokes around about how people were leaving Oppenheimer to go watch the Barbie movie, and I still think that ultimately, I mean, they both together made either about $1 billion or right around $1 billion.
Yeah, Oppenheimer, I think. Well, overall, you're right. I think
Right.
Oppenheimer is about, I think even right now, obviously it's not in theaters, but I think it topped out at about 939.
Yeah, so it was
And
pretty
Barbie's
close.
probably like, what, 1.3?
Right. So, because I mean, it wasn't the most, it didn't make the most money actually, but together they were, released around either on the same weekend or around the same weekend, and they just blew up the theaters, and it was crazy successful on both of those fronts. So, the comparison of Gladiator, which I feel is like a very action-heavy movie, and of course, as Kage mentioned, it's Roman history, so it's going to have that same historic feel that Oppenheimer had, although it's definitely not modern. The way that Oppenheimer is closer to our current time period,
Right.
but Barbie compared to Wicked is very fantastical. It's very loud, it's very bright, it's very colorful. It is geared more towards women. And, one of the things that I will say for me, having watched Wicked, is like, yes, I know that there's other people who go and see that movie other than just women. It speaks to anybody who loves theater and who loves musicals. All those people are going to go see this movie. However, the fact that you get Ariana Grande in there, that means you're going to get those younger audience members who are like, oh my gosh, it's Ariana Grande. So, you're going to have, some of the younger audience pulled in for that matter. But it's still the Wizard of Oz.
Right.
So, I mean, anybody who enjoys that kind of story and that fantasy world of that is going to enjoy this movie as well. For those reasons, I do think overall, looking at the Rotten Tomato score for this, I mean, it's got like a 90, the score, and then like the audience score is like 97. So, that speaks volumes, because we know next year we're going to get part 2.
Right.
So as I had mentioned previously in all these, this is part 1. You're going to get into it, and they have a cliffhanger, and so you're on edge now for a year. And I know with the marketing of this movie, they were not throwing part 1 in your face all over the place. They were kind of downplaying the fact that it's part 1, because as we've seen with other movies such as Mission Impossible, when they throw, hey, this is going to be part 1 of something. Earlier in 2000s, when we had all the Hunger Game movies and the Harry Potter movies and all those that were doing, part 1 this, part 1 this, part 2, that was acceptable back then. I don't think it's is as acceptable now.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of why they downplayed it. Obviously, right in the beginning credits, when they throw the movie title up there, there's off to the little side part 1. So it's not like they tricked the audience at the end of the
Yeah.
at the end of the film where you're all like, oh no, I didn't know this whole time. But they did a really great job getting the audience to really love this movie, in my opinion, because I know I really enjoyed it, and I felt like it was really close to the source material as well, which is great because, anytime you stray from source material, you run the risk of, ticking off your fan base. So in this case, I feel like they did such a great job keeping it close to that material. So when you're looking at these two movies compared to Oppenheimer and Barbie, they are a very good comparison, worthy of the Glicked name, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
If you're gonna take two movies and directly compare them to the Barbenheimer phenomenon, these I think are going to be your safest bet to get to
Yeah.
that conclusion of, oh yeah, they're going to make a ton of
I
money.
do have a question though.
Yes.
Speaking as someone who hasn't seen it, I don't watch musicals that often.
Mm-hmm.
But a wild card movie that I saw on a whim and actually liked
Wonka, right?
was Wonka.
Mm-hmm.
It was a musical, it was lighthearted, and I was like, this is not my go-to type of film, but I actually enjoyed this. It was a feel-good movie, and I watched it with my mom last year for Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, you know what, this is pretty cool. So my question for you is, well, first off, have you seen Wonka?
Yes.
So how does this compare, them being both musicals?
So Wonka does cover a little bit of themes that are maybe a little bit more mature. Wicked definitely has more mature themes. It is, yes, granted, there was a ton of younger audience members in my showing at least. And it's not like the material is so far above their head that they're not going to understand what's going on. I just think more the target audience is probably older teen to a young adult. Whereas Wonka, I feel like, is probably targeted a little bit towards like anywhere from like 10 to the teenage age group, as far as just the overall theme and songs.
Okay.
So like the songs, like there's not really any romance involved in, Wonka. It's mostly, about him, and I feel like it's a little bit more gender neutral.
Okay.
And Wicked, as I mentioned before, it's targeted probably a little bit more towards women, because there is a romance element to it. There is, a female empowerment element to it. There's, both of the main characters, both lead characters are women, and it focuses on friendship between those two. Okay. So, as well as adding in a romance element to it. And I'm not saying that men can't watch it and enjoy it. I feel like plenty of men who like those type of movies or like musicals in general would get a lot of enjoyment, because there's tons of like little bits of whimsy and comedy to
Okay.
them. They kind of scramble words for fun and just like little things like that make it. I think that any audience member who enjoys musicals would enjoy it. Again,
Okay.
like I said, if you're kind of on the fence about whether or not it's a movie that you would enjoy, I would say go online, maybe find, a song that they've done, because there's tons of content, because the musical has been running for years.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's tons of content out there from, anywhere from the original cast re-performing the songs like live, like on a stage or something. Like, Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth are like the original Glinda and Elphaba. And they constantly are like showing up and doing their songs either in cameos and other TV shows or movies. Well, not necessarily movies, but on stage for different
Okay.
performances and stuff. So you can easily find it and listen to a song and see like, hey, you know what? I like the tunes. I think it's catchy. I think
Alright,
I would
well,
enjoy
this-
it. And that way you're not committing to a 2 hour, 40-minute
Yeah.
movie where you're like, you know what? I'm not going to enjoy this,
Yeah.
these songs at all. Like,
Wow.
I know, so like I said, if we compare, getting back on topic with that, if we compare the numbers, I think, Neff, you have some numbers for us.
So for Wicked, and who knows if these are finalized for this first weekend here, but budget of $150 million, box office at $164.2 million. I know you were saying that it was kind of flip-flopped here, and it looks like it's flip-flopped on this end. It says the budget, obviously, for Gladiator, and we've talked about this on the Weekly Guys, it's between $210 and $310 million, and the current box office is $230 million. So, yeah, we'll just have to see. Obviously, there's different sources we can look into, but I would say a pretty successful weekend for both films. Obviously, Gladiator does have that big bloated budget, and when you watch the movie, you can see why. But $230 million for the first weekend is not bad, especially if this movie has legs, and I think it is going to have legs going into Thanksgiving Day weekend as well. And then Wicked's already got its production budget back, so we're not in the green necessarily, but I do think this movie's probably going to make $450 million, and it's going to be a success, and that's going to lead into the second part that Buttons talks about. I think
Yeah.
it's going to do well. I do want to see where Gladiator ends up at. It's going to be very interesting if this film actually makes money.
I heard
Like, it's going to be crazy.
I heard something online about Gladiator 3.
Yes, Ridley Scott said he is working on Gladiator 3.
We'll see how they spin that, if it'll be a
Right.
direct tie to Gladiator 2 or if it'll be another
It's gonna
time
be interesting.
time jump. Well, yeah, we'll definitely
And,
have to
and
see.
I think, you know, the performance of this movie, because they put so much money into it,
Correct.
it might mean that if, you know, once they start making 3, if they kind of maybe have to rein in that budget a little bit so that they can, you know, still make the movie, but the studio doesn't take like a loss on it.
Sure.
So, I mean, you know, as Neff mentioned, hopefully it'll continue to grow and we'll see that, you know, huge return on both of these movies.
Right.
And, you know, let's see, Glicked could get up there. You know, I think the only thing that really kind of hurts Wicked in this thing is because it is directly a musical compared to Barbie. So Barbie it did have a couple of songs in it,
Yeah, but it wasn't centered
but it
around
wasn't,
music.
yeah, it wasn't centered
Yeah.
around
To
music.
piggyback on what you're saying, because that does make sense, I think another thing that might hurt Wicked in particular is the fact that Moana 2 is coming out.
Right.
Where I don't think that's going to necessarily affect Gladiator as much because Gladiator is centered on adults.
But it's gonna
But
grab
it'll
that
mess with
younger
Wicked
audience.
because Wicked, right,
Yeah.
is centered on either women or young kids. So it's going to take that audience away. But I don't think it'll mess with Gladiator's audience. It will a little bit because
Yeah.
obviously people are like, all right, we saw it last week. You know what I mean? But
Right.
for the adults that haven't seen Gladiator or maybe are going to be double watching, I think Gladiator will
Kids
still
movies.
keep
Send the
going.
kids to Moana and go
And we're going to watch
Gladiator.
Gladiator or watch it again.
Yeah, the kids' movies tend to do very, very, very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have no doubt in my mind that Moana 2 is going to kill it. And they're also filming funny enough, they're filming the live action version
yeah,
of
exactly,
right
yeah.
now. So that's interesting that we
Yeah.
have 2 coming out and they're doing that. But
What you got?
We also have a lot of other live action movies in production
Yeah.
right now.
Were you about to go into Arcane? Because before you do, I want to say one more thing.
All
So
right.
we talked about the budget and the box office of Wicked and Gladiator 2 right now. So just for comparisons, because we did the whole Glicked Barbenheimer thing for this past weekend, we have a budget. This was Oppenheimer, guys. A budget of $100 million, and it made $976.8 million, obviously over time. And then Barbie, $128 million to $145 million, and it made $1.4 billion.
Yeah.
So just a whole nother type of phenomenon. But like Button said, if you are going to have a fair comparison, this would make sense because it's 2 huge movies, 2 different audiences it appealed to that
Right.
came out on the same weekend. So it's really the only thing that we've had in recent time that's the closest to the Barbenheimer thing, which is Glicked.
Yeah, especially because when you look at, you know, I can't tell you, because I don't know what the numbers would have been back when Barbenheimer was happening,
Yeah.
like as far as the pre-sales.
Yeah.
But the pre-sales for Wicked, and was huge. And so, you know, the only thing that I know I mentioned already, the ratings and the viewer scores for this movie was really high, but I almost kind of worry that everybody who did the pre-sales on this, like they've seen it and they're like, we loved it, and only 25% of those might go watch it again. But the thing that's going to hurt it the most, like I said, it being a musical, is you're going to have those people who are like, I'm just not interested in seeing a musical unless it's a kids show that I'm taking my kids to, in which
Right.
case that's going to be Moana.
Right.
Now I do know, like I said, I do know there's kids that are going to get, or that are going to have their parents, you know, going to get dragged in to go see Wicked, especially the teenage, preteen girl audience, I think, are pretty much going to be like, no, we have to see Wicked. We have to see Wicked. All my friends have seen it.
Right.
And that might carry them over into another high weekend for next weekend.
Yep.
But I think after that, it's going to start petering off because people are getting ready for Moana and the other movies.
I would
coming out.
say the studio did a good job with keeping that budget tame.
Yes.
That was the best thing they could have did for Wicked. And that budget's sky high, very hard to make money. But with that being said, Kage, please lead us into Arcane. Let's talk about the first 3 episodes in particular, because I know you and Buttons could have some good dialogue on that without spoiling anything else for anybody.
Okay.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm going to do my best. Yesterday was the last 3 episodes of season 2 and the last 3 episodes of the show. Arcane is an amazing series that I think everyone out there should give a chance. It's mature themes, great animation, great voice acting, not to mention the whole series feels like a music video. Some of the best songs ever
And
have
big
come.
artists
And big
singing them.
artists, yeah. This is no joke. They didn't grab some YouTubers
Yeah,
to
they
make
got like
some
Imagine
songs.
Dragons. So I
They-
mean, that's
yeah, they have-
some big names.
Huge names. Riot has their own music studio where they handpick people
In-house.
and they write songs for the characters, and all of these songs tell stories about the characters, but also tell stories about the scenes playing out, whatever those scenes and songs are connected to. But yeah, season 2, the first 3 episodes, yeah, we kind of go into, and I'm going to try my best not to spoil here. You know, it goes into the past. We talk a little bit about the past, about Jinx, you know, one of the main characters. Yeah, it's really difficult. Buttons. So you said you've seen the first 3
Yes.
episodes.
Yes.
So tell me your thoughts on that. Tell us your thoughts on that.
Okay, so yeah, no, I mean, I don't want to give any spoilers away, but it really picks up right after the first season ended, and I'm going to go ahead and say this because what happened in the first season, if you've already seen the first season, you know what happens. There's a big explosion. Jinx has launched a rocket at basically the council members, and that is how the first season ends, is like, oh, so when you first open up to the second season, they're, you know, trying to basically recover from that. There's a lot of tension because now they're like going to war, basically. They're deciding how to retaliate. And so there's a lot of political play in it. And, you know, as Kage mentioned, this is not, you know, kid themed. It is not, it definitely deals with more adult themes. Even if it's animated, it's still adult themed information, and they don't dumb it down so that like a 7-year-old would understand what's going on. It's very mature. But you have basically what's going on after all of the final episode has its betrayals, the different things that go on with, you know, this, how Vi and Jinx's relationships, and even Caitlyn and Vi, and you know, basically all of the different characters have their little poignant moments to leave you on a cliffhanger as to what's going on with them and how things are going to progress. So the first episode is basically just kind of catching you up as to what happened to these characters after that explosion happens.
Yeah.
And, you know, the second and third episodes, they're expounding more into, oh, okay, we are going to try it this way, and you know, the story takes place, and now we're having to pivot and see if we can make it work doing other ways. Because basically, you know, in the first one, they're not really hunting Jinx. In this season, it seems like they're launching into it's a manhunt for Jinx. So, you know, without giving too much away about that, obviously there's a manhunt for her because she attacked the city council, basically. And personally, the style and the story of this series, I really think that they did a good job trying to incorporate all that. Now, they keep throwing little teasers in there about what's going on with, so they have Hex Tech. And with Hex Tech, there's weapons that's being made. There's also some kind of blood, I guess you could say DNA splicing and some experimentations that go on with it. So, I mean, you kind of see that in the first season where, you know, what's Jack's, his friend?
Jax. Jace?
Jace, yes, excuse me.
Jace? Yeah, Jace and Victor
Victor.
are
Victor.
friends, and
And
they
Victor
are
has like a degenerative
right. And so what
disease.
their whole thing is, they are inventors. They're trying to figure out ways to make life easier for Piltover, the town, and so they are researching the Arcane. Or it's kind of magic, but they're trying to mix magic with science, and they're trying to figure out what can we do, how can we utilize this to improve people's lives, to
Got
make
some Full Metal Alchemist vibes to it.
yeah. And obviously the whole theme of Arcane, there's a lot of different themes, but for those two, it's like, what was that quote from Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park?
They were so busy trying to figure out whether they could do it, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Exactly. And Victor and Jace have a lot of great things that they bring to the table. Amazing, like, inventions. They said this can be used in weapons, but this can also be used in transportation, like a not a
Yeah.
renewable energy source, but a constant
not-
energy source.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
like
their big
there's
thing was they're not trying to make weapons, they're trying to make people's lives better.
Right. But of course, like with any invention,
There's
any
pros and
technology,
cons.
there's pros and cons. So you got that aspect. You got the dichotomy between Piltover and the Lanes. The Lanes is like the lower part of the town. That's where all the crime is, the drugs.
It's the wrong
and
side
all.
of the
It's the
railroad
wrong
tracks.
side, yeah. And so the whole show is, there's like a war between those two. And so the show jumps around between the characters, showing where they're at. And as we go into season 2, it's building up to a huge conflict, and everyone has their own motives and whatnot, and their own backstories. And season 2 does go into backstories a little bit,
Yes.
explaining a little bit more about why people are the way they are.
And it's introducing new information as well. Like what I was trying to get at is you start to see in season 1 with Victor's story. There's a scientist. And I don't remember the scientist's name.
Yeah,
but he's got
let's-
like a creature, and so they keep hinting at what's going on with this giant monster creature. And so right now in season 2, they just keep showing this couple little flashes here
Yeah,
and there.
and if you know anything about the game,
Yes.
which I do, you know what that is.
Now right, we know the monster, but the character, is that supposed, do you think that's Singe? Because
Singe is I don't want to give too much away. Everyone, let's just.
well, they haven't come out and said that that's who he is, so that's
Singe,
kind of where
Singe
I'm
is
like,
the name of
questioning.
the scientist.
okay.
That's the name of the scientist. What he's working on, what he's doing, all these little genetic experiments are leading up to something, and I will leave it at that.
But they're teasing us.
Oh, absolutely. So Here's what I'll say, folks. I did watch the final 3 episodes. I gotta say, an amazing end to an amazing series, an amazing story.
Do they leave it open for
Um,
the world, or is it more? Because I know this is what the studios said, that this is the end of these character stories.
Right.
So, but
So-
of course,
so-
the Lanes and Piltover in general are characteristic of the game. Well, the Lanes is anyway.
Yeah.
Piltover was introduced as
Um,
part of this
you know,
series.
It's really difficult for me to say on one hand, if you were watching the show as is, let's say you know nothing about the game, maybe you know something about the game, everything was pretty final. You're
Okay.
not questioning what's going on with this person,
Or
what's going to
characters.
happen with this. Everything is a fitting, definitive end. And I feel like if they said that this is it, I'd be content with that. Now, I have seen numerous news articles that they do want to continue the Arcane show. However, it's based on League of Legends. There's 150 something characters, with more characters being added every year. That being said, they have, just like Marvel, they have more than enough years,
going, yeah.
more than enough characters to make an entire show, a series. So we can continue a new Arcane show with the same animators, but now we're going to tell a story about different characters.
Right.
And maybe in a different place. The planet is, I believe that's called Runeterra, and the season 1 and 2 is about Piltover and the lanes and the people within those lanes and those places
could
and their
shift.
conflicts, and they can shift. Could they already said they want to make another Arcane show. Will they call it Arcane? I don't know, but it could be still set in Runeterra, but it's going to be following different characters. So we'll just have to see. But as far as season 3, I think it was absolutely beautiful.
Are you
like
talking about
just
the last 3 episodes?
The last 3 episodes,
Okay.
and I think it's a fitting end to the series as a whole. I think my only complaint is that, and I've been seeing this online as well, is that those last 3 episodes feel a little rushed. Yeah. But there's a reason for that, okay? Right. This series was incredibly expensive to make and to distribute, and it took a long time. Yes, so
that was one of the biggest complaints that I had for this series. Is they released the first season, and I was like, oh man, and we binged it. Like we watched it. I've actually seen it, I think maybe 3 times now, the first season. Like, cause I binged it and then I said, oh my gosh, it's great. And I made my boyfriend watch it. And then, we watched it again because there was like was it a 3-year gap, 4-year gap?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, there was like I said, there was a huge gap.
It's been a minute.
There was a huge gap between the first season and the second season. And, and that was the biggest complaint that I have, is how big of a gap there was. Because if they really want people to stay engaged with Arcane universe, I guess you could say, or even just, League of Legends universe, as far as having a TV show, I think they need to work out some kinks in that and figure out how to produce these shows probably cheaper, as you're mentioning right now, and get them produced faster.
I mean, I would
Maybe like a spin-off type thing.
I was going to say, first off, I believe this show is art, and I don't think any art should be rushed.
Yeah.
I am a fan of the series, and I do share your sentiments, and I know a lot of people out there do too. They want to see it.
I just think they're going to lose viewership, is what I'm
Well,
getting
I don't
at.
think they are going to lose viewership, because League of Legends is a multi-billion-dollar business that is ongoing, that has a televised international, a championship from professional teams. It's not disappearing. You may not be a gamer, but they don't need your views or support. There are
Well, I don't.
million.
I
Well, I'm
don't
saying
think the
it's
game
not.
is going to suffer. I'm saying.
Well, no, I'm
that
saying
Netflix
because the
producing this and putting it on the platform,
Yeah.
they're going to suffer if they. I mean, like I said, if you're sitting there and you have all these options to choose from for shows, and you look at this series and you're going, okay, it was the same argument they had for Stranger Things, The first couple of seasons, they came out pretty quick, and then all of
Yeah.
a sudden, they started having these huge gaps in between the seasons.
Like, I
And because
agree
of
with that.
The different, difficulties of producing such a heavy CGI and
Well,
special effects show.
what I'm saying is, League of Legends is a long series or game. It's more famous than League of Legends. And the reason why I brought up the game is that people aren't going to forget, because this show has garnered the viewership of not only the gamers, but also non-gamers. I feel like it's such a great show. Now, obviously, you don't want to wait forever, right? You don't want to give a 10-year gap and say, oh, we made it. So, like, 2 to 3 years, while I don't want that to happen, I would love for it to come out every summer, or every fall, have a new Arcane show. If they can figure out a way to do it without degrading the quality, then that would be awesome. But I don't think it didn't hurt the viewership at all. Now, hopefully, again, they can do that. They can maintain, because I do understand what you're saying. You know, if you wait too long, it can hurt. It can hurt the fan base. They're not going to come back if you wait too long. Obviously, it did take a long time, but it didn't hurt the viewership. Everyone's talking about all the articles, the comments on YouTube, on Reddit. Everything I'm seeing is all positive. But one thing here, though, that I see is that Netflix paid $300 million for the license fee per episode. So this was a very, very expensive thing on their part.
Per
on
episode they paid
It
that
says
much?
Arcane will almost certainly not be profitable for Riot, the creators of the game, despite the $3 million per episode license fee Netflix paid for its worldwide distribution
Okay,
rights.
3 million, because I thought you said 300.
Yeah, it sounded
Oh,
like
sorry. My bad.
I was all like, I was like,
Yeah,
yay!
but it says the combined budget of both
Netflix filing
seasons.
for bankruptcy.
Yeah, the combined budget for both seasons of Arcane is reported to be $250 million. Wow. This is not a cheap series to make.
Yeah.
The animation, the fight
Yeah.
sequences,
Yeah, no,
the
the animation
music,
is beautiful.
and you got to think they had to pay all these artists to make the show, but these artists to make music for the show. And then these songs are put in the World's Tournament that takes place in a different country every year. Linkin Park was chosen to make the theme, and they performed at the World's Tournament. Yeah, Riot is killing it games-wise with making the show. Hopefully, we do get another Arcane show in the future. But guys, get out there and go see this. I promise you won't be disappointed. I'm not going to give anything away, but if you do not cry, you are a robot. like it really hits you. It's war. People die. Revelations come out. There's betrayal. There's love. There's something for everybody.
The writing is so good in this that, you know, I agree with Kage. It hits a lot of emotional points in the series, even within just the first season.
Sure.
So I mean, you know, and you get the character build in this, which is great. You know, there's some characters that aren't as fleshed out as others, but the main characters in the story, they really, you know, dive deep into motivations and, you know, their backstories and everything else. So
Development.
exactly, they're very, very well fleshed out.
So what I'll say is, since we had a great conversation, and it was a great conversation because it kind of covers the whole season without giving away too many details, even though you guys focused on the first 3 episodes. What we'll do is when we come back to the table, we'll do the second act, or it would be episodes 4, 5, and 6. We'll talk about that. And then eventually we'll get to the last 3, like you said. And then you'll be able to talk about the whole thing in general and say, hey, this is how this led into that. That's why that happened. This is how this character was affected. And then this is what I think is going to happen.
And
once
by
everybody
then, I
sees
think
it.
we can probably go in without having to worry about spoilers.
Exactly. So I think that was a great episode. We talked about Gladiator. We talked about Wicked. Guys, go watch those 2 films right now. It's an event.
Glicked happen.
Glicked, make Glicked happen, button says. So yeah, go watch those 2 films. They're pretty solid films. We talked about Arcane, pretty solid show. I think it was just a great episode all the way around, guys. Please comment down below what you think about all this stuff. Like this video. Please like the video. Ring the bell for notifications so you guys get updated with these videos as soon as they release. Subscribe to the channel. We are trying to get to 500 subscribers now, and every subscription helps. I am Neff signing off with
Kage.
and
Buttons.
as always, be safe.